There comes an age when you no longer regret only what you did. You also regret what you revealed too easily. The plans you spoke before they were ready. The pain you handed to someone who did not know how to hold it. The old wounds you uncovered before the wrong eyes. The private truths that should have stayed close, protected, and quiet. After 70, many people begin to feel something they cannot quite name. Not regret for action, but regret for words. For openness offered too freely. For honesty given to those who were never worthy of it. And here is what nobody tells you. Not every truth brings freedom when spoken aloud. Not every listener is a safe place. Not every form of honesty is wisdom. The Buddha taught that wise speech is not measured by how much you say. It is measured by whether your words reduce suffering or quietly create more of it. Silence, he taught, can be compassion. Silence can be discipline. Silence can be the most dignified protection of your own peace. By this stage of life, something shifts. Peace depends less on being fully understood by everyone, and more on learning what no longer needs to be placed in the hands of the world. There are some things that, after 70, should be spoken less often, held more carefully, and entrusted only to wisdom. Message 1. Speak less of your plans. Think about the last time you told someone about something you were planning to do, something that still felt tender, still forming, and watch what happened next. Maybe they smiled politely. Maybe they asked a question that planted doubt. Maybe they said nothing at all, and somehow that silence was worse. Or maybe they were enthusiastic for a moment, and then life moved on, and suddenly the dream felt a little smaller than it did before you spoke it out loud. This is not a small thing. And it happens more often than most people realize. There is a reason why, in many ancient traditions, a new intention was treated almost like a newborn child. You do not carry a newborn into a crowd of strangers the first hour of its life. You protect it. You hold it close. You give it warmth before you give it the world. A new dream works the same way. When something is still fragile, still finding its shape inside you, the mind that holds it is not yet strong enough to absorb the weight of other people's doubts. And people will always have doubts, not because they wish you harm, but because their own fears are never far from the surface. When you speak of your plans to someone who is quietly afraid of change, of failure, of the unknown, their fear does not stay inside them. It reaches toward you. It wraps itself in the language of concern. In questions like, "Are you sure? And isn't that a lot to take on at your age? And what if it doesn't work?" And slowly, without meaning to, you begin to hear those voices as your own. The Buddha taught something about this that most people miss. He spoke of the mind as something that must be tended carefully, the way a farmer tends the soil before planting. The conditions must be right, the ground must be prepared. A seed placed into cold, hard earth does not thrive. It simply waits, or it perishes. Your intention is the seed. And the opinions of unprepared listeners are cold ground. But here is what the outline of this teaching often does not say, and what must be said. The deeper reason we speak too soon is not always because we want support. Often, it is because we want to be seen. We want someone to know we are still alive with ambition, still capable of dreaming, still someone worth watching. We announce the plan because the announcement itself carries a small, quiet reward. The raised eyebrow, the admiring nod, the sense that we matter, that we are moving, that we have not become invisible. This is ego, asking to be fed before the work has even begun. And ego fed on words alone grows soft. It mistakes the applause for the harvest. It begins to feel that speaking about the journey is the same as walking it. There is a story of a monk who came to his teacher one morning and said, "I have decided to spend the next year in deep meditation. I have told my family. I have told the other monks. I am ready." The teacher looked at him for a long moment and said simply, "You have already spent much of your energy. Sit quietly now and see what is left." The monk understood. The telling had borrowed against the doing. After 70, something begins to shift in how you relate to this. You have lived long enough to know the difference between a dream that was spoken and one that was lived. You have seen plans dissolve in the warmth of too many conversations. You have felt the strange exhaustion that comes from explaining your intentions to people who were never going to help you build them. This is not about becoming closed. It is not about isolation or distrust or keeping everyone at a distance. There are people in your life whose steadiness can hold your plans gently, people with maturity, with goodwill, with enough stillness in themselves that they will not project their own anxiety onto what you are trying to create. Speak to them when you need support. Speak to them when you need wisdom. But speak to the crowd when the thing is already done. Let them see the fruit. They were never meant to tend the soil. After 70, you no longer need witnesses for every intention. You let your life ripen before you explain it. Not every dream needs an audience. Some need stillness. Message 2. Speak less of your money. There is a moment many people can recall with uncomfortable clarity. The moment a relationship quietly changed, not because of an argument, not because of a betrayal in the usual sense, but because someone found out how much you had. It might have been a casual comment, a figure mentioned without thinking, a house someone saw, a trip someone heard about, a gift that was too generous and said too much. And after that moment, something shifted. The warmth was still there on the surface, but underneath it, something new had entered the room. Expectation, calculation, a quiet repositioning of where you stood in relation to what you owned. You felt it, you just did not always know what to name it. Money does not corrupt people the way we sometimes imagine. It does not turn good people suddenly cruel. What it does is simpler and more insidious than that. It rearranges relationships. It changes the invisible architecture of who owes what to whom. And once that rearrangement happens, it is very difficult to undo. The Buddha never condemned wealth. He taught in palaces and to kings. He walked with merchants and with farmers equally. What he pointed to, always, was not the thing itself, but the craving surrounding it. The suffering does not live in the money. It lives in what the mind does with money. The grasping, the comparing, the endless measuring of who has more, who has less, who deserves what, and who does not. When you speak openly of what you have, you do not only share information, you plant seeds of craving in minds that may not even realize they are craving. And those seeds grow quietly into expectations that feel, to the person holding them, entirely reasonable. But here is the layer that most conversations about money never reach, and it is the most important one. After 70, many people give too much, speak too freely of what they have, because they are afraid. Not afraid of losing money, afraid of losing relevance, afraid of the slow, creeping sense that as the body ages and the roles fall away, the only remaining currency is usefulness. So they give, they offer, they make themselves available as a resource, because being needed feels, at least for a moment, like being loved. This is one of the quiet heartbreaks of later life, and it deserves to be named with compassion, not judgment. The confusion of being useful with being loved is not weakness. It is the natural result of a life spent in service, in contribution, in building something for others. But at this age, that confusion begins to cost more than it once did. Because what is being spent is not only money, it is peace. It is the quiet freedom of a life without obligation, manufactured by your own generosity. The Buddha asked a question that cuts through all of this with unusual clarity. He asked not whether we are giving, but why. Is your giving rooted in genuine compassion, in the clear-eyed desire to reduce someone's suffering? Or is it rooted in fear, in the need to be approved of, in the anxiety that comes from imagining yourself no longer needed? Compassion and fear can look identical from the outside. Only the giver knows the difference, and only the giver pays the cost of the confusion. This is not an argument against generosity. Generosity, given wisely, is one of the most beautiful expressions of a life well lived. Give where giving truly helps. Give where it opens rather than creates dependency. Give without advertising it, without building your identity around it, without speaking of your resources in ways that invite others to arrange their hopes around your wallet. Protect what you have not from greed, but from wisdom, because what you are protecting is not a number in an account. It is your freedom from the quiet resentment that builds when you give more than you chose to give, to people who never asked how much it cost you. At this age, peace is worth more than appearing generous to everyone. What you protect is not only your money, it is your freedom from obligation, from guilt, and from the kind of quiet resentment that poisons even the warmest of relationships. Message 3. Speak less of your pain to the wrong people. There is something that happens slowly, so slowly you almost do not notice it happening. You begin to mention your pain, a knee that aches, a night that would not let you sleep, a sadness that settled in and did not leave. At first, it is simply honest, simply human, and the people around you listen. They nod. They offer the warmth of their attention. But then you mention it again, and somewhere along the way, without anyone saying a word, something shifts. The eyes that once held yours with concern begin to drift. The conversations grow shorter. People find reasons to be somewhere else, and you are left with a feeling you cannot quite explain. The pain is still real, but now there is a second pain underneath it. The pain of feeling invisible precisely at the moment you were trying most desperately to be seen. This is not cruelty. It is simply the limit of what most people can hold, and it points to something the Buddha understood with great precision. Suffering is real. He never once asked us to pretend otherwise. The first noble truth is not think positively. It is this: suffering exists. It is woven into the fabric of being alive. To deny it is not wisdom. It is just a different kind of wound. But Buddhism draws a line that most people never see. There is a difference between acknowledging suffering and circling it endlessly. There is a difference between feeling pain and becoming it. The teaching is not to suppress what hurts. The teaching is to bring awareness to what hurts, without losing yourself inside it. When the mind circles a wound again and again, replaying the ache, announcing it to every available ear, it is not healing. It is rehearsing. It is keeping the wound warm and open when what the wound actually needs is stillness and skilled care. Here is the insight that deserves to be spoken plainly, because it is rarely spoken at all. Many older people repeat their suffering not because they are weak, not because they are difficult, but because they are lonely. Because pain has become the only reliable way to make the world stop and look at them. Beneath the complaint about the body, Beneath the repeated telling of what hurts, there is almost always something tenderer than the pain itself. There is a longing to matter, a fear of disappearing, a quiet cry that says, "I am still here. Please do not forget that I am still here." That is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to be met with enormous gentleness. But the tragedy is this: when pain becomes the primary language we use to ask for love, it eventually drives away the very connection we are reaching for. Not because we are too much, but because we are asking the wrong rooms to hold what only certain rooms can hold. A doctor can hold the pain of the body with skill. A trusted friend can hold the weight of grief with steadiness. A spouse who has walked beside you for decades can hold what a stranger never could. A spiritual guide, a therapist, a wise companion who has known their own darkness and found their way through it. These are the right rooms. These are the spaces sacred enough to receive what you are carrying. The grocery store clerk is not. The neighbor you see twice a month is not. The family member who has their own unprocessed grief is not. Not because they do not care, but because they do not have the tools. And handing something fragile to someone without the tools for it helps no one. The Buddha once said, "This is suffering." 3 words: present, clear. Not dramatized, not suppressed, just named with full awareness and then held in spacious attention. That is the practice. To say this hurts, and to remain larger than the hurt. To feel the ache in the body without letting the ache write your entire story. To know that the body may weaken and awareness can still remain open, still remain dignified, still remain free. Your suffering is real. It does not need to be performed in public to matter. It does not need an audience to be valid. After 70, peace comes when you learn to bring your pain to those who can truly help it, and to protect it from the rooms that will only make it heavier. Your pain deserves compassion, but compassion is not found in every room. Message 4. Speak less of your past mistakes to those who cannot hold them wisely. There is a weight that some people carry for decades, not the weight of what they did, the weight of what they never told anyone. And there comes a moment, usually later in life, when that weight becomes unbearable, when the need to set it down somewhere, to hand it to another person and finally breathe freely becomes so strong that judgment no longer feels like a risk worth calculating. You simply need to speak. You simply need someone to know. This impulse is deeply human, and it deserves to be honored, not dismissed. But here is what nobody warns you about. Not every confession leads to relief. Some lead somewhere much darker. The person you trusted becomes the person who defines you by it. The private admission becomes a story that travels further than you ever intended. And the shame you were trying to dissolve becomes somehow larger, somehow more permanent, because now it lives not only inside you, but in the mouth of someone who never had the tools to hold it with care. You shared a wound, and it was handled without gloves. In Buddhism, the purpose of facing the past is never self-exposure. It is not confession as performance, not honesty as unburdening at someone else's expense. The purpose is awakening, repentance, the sincere turning of the mind away from what caused harm toward what can now do differently. This is an interior process before it is ever a social one. The question Buddhism asks is not who needs to know. The question is what needs to change. And here is the deeper truth that this conversation rarely reaches. Sometimes people reveal old shame not because they have truly faced it, but because they are desperate to be relieved of it. They want someone else to say, "It is all right now. You are forgiven. you can put it down. They are searching for absolution from the outside because the inside still feels too tangled to navigate alone. But no one can absolve a mind that still clings to its old story. If you still define yourself by what you did, if the guilt is still the loudest voice in the room, then even the most generous sympathy from another person will not set you free. It will comfort you for a moment. And then the weight will return, because the work was never finished. It was only briefly shared. This does not mean the past should be sealed away in permanent silence. Some wrongs require direct acknowledgement. Some situations call for apology, for repair, for accountability to the person who was actually harmed. When harm is ongoing, silence is not wisdom. It is avoidance wearing the mask of peace. But there is a difference between the amends that genuinely matter and the exposure that only serves the ego's need to feel unburdened. Many old wounds do not need an audience. They need something quieter and more demanding than confession. They need honest reflection. They need sincere remorse, held privately, steadily, without drama. They need the changed behavior that no speech can replace. They need the compassion you slowly, carefully learn to offer the younger version of yourself who did not yet know what you know now. There is a teaching from the tradition of the elder monks. A student once asked, "How do I make peace with what I have done?" The teacher said, "Stop doing it, then live so differently that the old action no longer belongs to who you are becoming." That is the practice, not display, transformation. After 70, you have lived long enough to understand that some people collect the vulnerabilities of others the way others collect old coins, not to preserve them, to spend them, to pass them around in rooms you will never enter. And the most private truth you ever spoke, offered in a moment of raw and genuine need, can become currency in a conversation you were never meant to hear. This is not bitterness. This is clarity. You get to choose where your unfinished healing goes. After 70, peace comes when you stop reopening old graves for people who only want something to whisper about. Some parts of the past are not healed by being displayed. They are healed by being understood, repented, and released. Message 5. Speak less of what others told you in trust. Think of the last time someone leaned close and said, "I need to tell you something, but please keep this between us." In that moment, something passed between two people that was not just information. It was a small, fragile act of surrender. The person speaking was making themselves briefly defenseless. They were handing you a portion of their unguarded self, not the polished version they show the world. The real one, the frightened one, the one still figuring things out. That is not a small thing to be handed. And most people, in that moment, fully intend to honor it. They mean to keep it. They hold it carefully for a day, perhaps a week, but then comes a quiet conversation with someone else. A moment that calls for intimacy, for connection, for something interesting to say. And the secret surfaces, not maliciously, just quietly, just once, just to this one person who surely will not pass it further. But it always goes further. And somewhere, in a room you were never in, the person who trusted you discovers that what they gave you in their most vulnerable moment has been traveling without them. That is not a small betrayal. That is the kind that does not heal easily. The kind where the friendship may survive in form, but something essential inside it has gone quiet forever. The Buddha identified gossip as one of the clearest violations of right speech. Not because words are trivial, but because they are not. Words carry weight. Words move through communities the way water moves through soil, finding every crack, reaching places you never intended. What leaves your mouth in a moment of careless intimacy can arrive somewhere else as damage you will never fully see. But Buddhism does not ask us to stop there, at the surface of behavior. It asks us to look at what drives the behavior underneath. Why do people repeat what they were asked to keep? Sometimes it is the desire to feel important, to be the one who knows something others do not. There is a quiet pleasure in that, a small inflation of significance. The ego, which is always hungry for status, discovers that other people's private pain is a surprisingly reliable currency for purchasing attention. Sometimes it is the desire for closeness. We share a secret to create intimacy, to pull someone nearer, to say, "Look, I trust you with this." But when the secret belongs to someone else, we are purchasing our own intimacy with their vulnerability. We are spending what was never ours to spend. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of speech that divides, that harms, that serves the self at the cost of another. It is not always loud. It is often quiet, well-intentioned, and dressed in the language of concern. Did you hear what happened to her? I am only telling you because I care. When someone gives you their secret, they are not giving you a story. They are giving you their trust. And trust, the Buddha understood, is built in drops and lost in floods. Now there is something that must be said here, because wisdom without moral clarity is just comfort. Not every secret should be kept. There are moments when silence becomes complicity, when someone tells you they are being hurt, endangered, manipulated, or abused. Protecting that secret is not loyalty. It is abandonment wearing the face of discretion. Wisdom is not the same as concealment, and protecting trust should never mean protecting violence. This distinction matters. It is the difference between a guardian and an accomplice. For everything else, the tradition offers a simple practice. Before repeating what you have heard, pause. Ask whether it is true, whether it is necessary, whether it is kind, whether it serves any purpose beyond your own need to speak it, and whether this is even the right moment for it at all. If it cannot pass through all 5 of those questions with a clear answer, it belongs in silence. After 70, something clarifies. You begin to understand that trust is rarer than affection and far more valuable than popularity. People may like you for being entertaining, but they will return to you again and again because you are safe. The mouth that cannot protect what it hears will slowly lose the right to hear what matters. Unifying reflection. Why do people overshare in the first place? Before we go further, let us pause for a moment. Because everything we have spoken about so far, the plans revealed too soon, the finances exposed carelessly, the pain scattered to the wrong ears, the old shame uncovered before unkind eyes, the secrets passed on without permission, all of it points back to the same place, the same quiet hunger underneath. And that hunger deserves to be named with gentleness, not judgment. People do not overshare because they are foolish. They do not speak too much because they lack dignity or discipline. Most of the time, they overshare because they are carrying something alone that was never meant to be carried alone, and the weight has simply become too much. Think about what it feels like to hold something heavy for a very long time. The arms begin to tremble, the back begins to ache, and eventually, almost without deciding to, you set it down, not because you chose the right moment, simply because you could not hold it any longer. Much of unnecessary speech is exactly that, the arms giving out, the heart reaching for relief in the only way it knows how, in that moment. After 70, the hunger takes specific shapes, the hunger to be understood by someone, anyone, after decades of being misread. The hunger for admiration, to know that the life you built still registers as something worth noticing. The hunger for comfort, to hear another voice say you did the best you could, and the best you could was enough. The hunger for absolution, to be released from the grip of old regrets without having to do the harder interior work of releasing yourself. And perhaps most quietly, most persistently, the hunger simply not to disappear, to speak and have someone turn toward you, to exist in someone else's awareness, even briefly, even imperfectly. These are not weaknesses. These are the most human hungers there are. The Buddha understood this. He did not design his teachings for people who had already transcended need. He designed them for people exactly like us, people who ache, who crave, who reach outward for what can only ultimately be found by turning inward. What he offered was not judgment for the reaching. He offered a clearer path toward what we are actually looking for. Because the deeper truth is this: every time we speak too much, we are not being careless with words. We are being careless with ourselves. We are handing the most tender parts of our inner life to rooms and people that were never built to hold them. And afterward, we do not feel lighter. We feel exposed. We feel the specific loneliness of someone who spoke and was not truly heard. The practice is not to stop being hungry. The practice is to bring that hunger to wiser places, to learn, slowly and with great compassion for yourself, the difference between speaking from need and speaking from clarity, between reaching for relief and reaching for connection that can actually hold you. This is not a small thing to learn, at any age. But after 70, there is something in you that already knows the difference. You have felt both. You know what it costs to give your words to the wrong places. And you know, even if only in brief, quiet moments, what it feels like to speak the right thing to the right person at the right time, and to have it land somewhere that holds it with care. That knowing is not nothing. That knowing is the beginning of wisdom. So let us say this clearly before we close. This is not a teaching about becoming closed. It is not an instruction to stop trusting, stop sharing, stop opening yourself to the people you love. A life sealed shut is not a peaceful life. It is just a lonely one wearing the mask of discipline. There are moments when speaking is the bravest and most necessary thing you can do. When silence protects dysfunction. When withholding becomes a wall rather than a boundary. When the right words, offered to the right person at the right moment, can change the direction of a life. Those moments are real. And in those moments, speak. Speak clearly, speak honestly, speak with the full weight of what you have learned. But between those moments, and there is a great deal of space between those moments, the invitation is different. The invitation is to become discerning. Not silent, discerning. To learn the difference between words that build and words that only release pressure, between sharing that connects and sharing that simply empties, between the confession that heals and the confession that only performs healing for an audience. The Buddha did not teach his monks to stop speaking. He taught them to speak with awareness, to ask before each word whether it was true, whether it was helpful, whether it was offered at the right time and in the right spirit, not as a rigid formula, as a practice of attention, as a way of honoring both the speaker and the one who receives. After 70, you have already explained enough. You have already defended yourself enough, justified enough, apologized enough, revealed enough to people who did not know what to do with what you gave them. You have earned the quieter life, not the life of someone who has nothing left to say, the life of someone who has finally learned what is worth saying, and to whom, and when. Protect your plans until they are strong enough to stand without applause. Protect your finances from the entanglements that charity without boundaries creates. Bring your pain to the people and places built to receive it. Offer your old wounds the dignity of private transformation rather than public display. And guard what others have trusted you with as though your own character depends on it, because it does. Let silence become part of your practice. Not the silence of someone who has given up, the silence of someone who has finally come home to themselves. There is a freedom that arrives quietly when you no longer feel compelled to narrate your inner life to everyone who passes through it. When you no longer need the world's understanding to feel that your life has meaning. When you can sit with your own thoughts, your own history, your own becoming, and find that the company is enough. This is not hardness. This is not bitterness. This is not the closing of a heart that once knew how to love. This is wisdom. This is restraint. This is the particular peace that only comes to those who have lived long enough to understand what words truly cost and what silence can sometimes give back. Breathe that in for a moment. You do not need to explain yourself to the world any longer. The world has had its time with you. Now, this time, these remaining days and seasons and quiet mornings, this time belongs to you. Protect it, honor it, live it gently and with great care. That is enough. You are enough. And the peace you are looking for has been waiting just beneath the noise all along.